A couple of nights ago, Donald Trump announced hundreds of people had been arrested in relation to the vandalism and destruction of statues and other public monuments. Now, I don't know how many people have actually been arrested. There's no great press release coming out from every single one of these law enforcement agencies. But there have been several reports locally from various police departments that, yes, several people have been arrested. We now know, as of the other day, that the FBI is tracking down suspects involved in the Lafayette Park riots where they tried to pull down the Andrew Jackson statue and failed. I don't know if these people end up being arrested, but it seems like the FBI is actually going after them, and Donald Trump is taking everything one or two steps further. He's going to be signing an executive order, and he's going to be creating a task force. Well, he did sign an executive order, and he did launch a task force to target extremists, mostly because of the destruction of monuments and private property, or public property, I should say. But he's not just going after the far left. He's also concerned about the Boogaloo Boys. Now, I don't think, as the media would try to portray, that the Boogaloo Boys are necessarily a movement of sorts, but there are people online who use this terminology and are talking about preparing for a civil war. I'm not going to pretend to know a whole lot about this. I have covered Antifa a lot in the past, but let's read the story and see what's going on. But I want to point something out that I've mentioned several times. The rioting and the protests have not stopped. They haven't stopped. They're still going on. And this is one of the reasons Donald Trump is doing what he's doing. It's been 5 weeks. You'd think they'd stop at some point, but no. The far left genuinely believes it's their revolution. Not every single one of them probably, but many of them are on camera saying it. There's some video from, I think, Portland, where a bunch of Antifa types are yelling at a cop saying, June 2020 will be in the history books. This is our revolution, our uprising, blah, blah, blah. You can see similar stuff on Twitter. So they really think this is their one chance. They're not going to let it go. They're going to the extreme, and they're trying to tear down Abraham Lincoln in Washington, D.C. Well, Donald Trump won't let them do that. However, we did see a rather viral moment where conservative reporter Jack Posobiec went down to see what was going on. They attacked him, threw water on him, and tried stealing his phone, which is par for the course for Antifa. But it's created this rather viral moment. We also have a few other big stories. Cops are being attacked with fireworks. So yes, let's read the executive order, but I want to tell you why it's necessary. I don't know exactly what Trump can or will do, but I'm telling you, these protests haven't stopped, and I'm going to show you they're still ongoing. This is from the Essex Daily Voice. They say, new Trump order carries long prison terms for defacing monuments. NJ top Fed leads task force. In advance of the 4th of July, President Trump on Friday signed an executive order that he said promises long prison terms for those who vandalize American monuments, memorials, and statues. Quote, I just had the privilege of signing a very strong executive order protecting American monuments, memorials, and statues, and combating recent criminal violence, Trump tweeted. Long prison terms for these lawless acts against our great country. In another move, U.S. Attorney for New Jersey, Craig Carpenito, was appointed to co-lead a task force to counter anti-government extremists, specifically Antifa and those supporting the far-right Boogaloo movement. The group will be comprised of members of U.S. Attorney's Office and FBI offices throughout the country who will share information with local and state law enforcement and provide training on identifying anti-government extremists, the Justice Department said. Well, I hate to say it, Trump, but I got some bad news for you. Many of these extremists are in media and have been lying about you and many other people for a long time. So how do you stop the expansion of this extremist ideology, which foments violence, when people in media support it over and over again? Now, this is one of the great challenges of the First Amendment. They're allowed to. They're allowed to support it, give their support. And if that ideology expands, they will subvert the rule of law, which creates a very difficult position for people in this country, how to deal with it and make sure things don't fall apart, right? Let's keep reading. They say, Attorney General William P. Barr also reportedly told U.S. Marshals nationwide on Friday to prepare to protect the monuments from harm. Quote, this is a challenging assignment due to the breadth of possible targets for criminal activity, Marshals Service Assistant Director Andrew C. Smith wrote in an email obtained by the Washington Post. A joint operations center will be up and running in Springfield, Virginia, with days, said Smith, who asked for volunteers from the service's district and divisions. Marshals ordinarily capture fugitives, protect witnesses, transfer prisoners, and provide courthouse security. Trump earlier this week wrote that he'd authorized the Justice Department, which oversees the Marshals Service, to arrest anyone who vandalizes or destroys any monument, statue, or other such federal property in the U.S. with up to 10 years in prison per the Veterans Memorial Preservation Act or such other laws that may be pertinent. The president followed that with Friday's announcement of the executive order, which prohibits the desecration of public monuments, vandalizing government property, and other acts of violence. These include Confederate statues, his administration said. The order also not only withholds federal support tied to public spaces from those state and local governments that don't enforce their own measures to protect public monuments, it withdraws grants from those who don't take the necessary measures to stop it. Federal assistance is available to help pay for that protection under the order. Well, I tell you what, man, sounds like Donald Trump's covered all his bases in this executive order. Now, this is a photo of Jack Posobiec standing in up to some Antifa lunatics who are coming out thinking that they're the resistance or whatever. And this photo, I don't want to say historic or anything like that, but I'm kind of insinuating it. But look at this photo. It really does capture the moment very, very well. It's two people facing down, and this is a lot of what we're seeing. But I'll tell you what, Jack Posobiec was the only one who went down, and he went down in the capacity as a reporter, as a pundit or whatever. You know, he's not going there to link arms and defend the statue necessarily, although I'm pretty sure Jack was trying to defend the statue of Abraham Lincoln. This wasn't like an organized protest or riot like the left would engage in. So this shows, I mean, look at this with the statue right in the background. It's very, very different how the left and the right are approaching this. I'm fighting a sneeze, mind you. But here's the official statement from the whitehouse.gov, which I want to read to you. Executive order on protecting American monuments, memorials, and statues and combating recent criminal violence. Now, this is important because it lays out their goal and the purpose for it. The White House says, the first duty of government is to ensure domestic tranquility and defend life, property, and the right of its citizens. Over the last 5 weeks, there's been a sustained assault on the life and property of civilians, law enforcement officers, government property, and revered American monuments, such as the Lincoln Memorial. Many of the rioters, arsonists, and left-wing extremists who have carried out and supported these acts have explicitly identified themselves with ideologies such as Marxism that call for the destruction of the United States government. Well, if that's the case, man, I got bad news for you, Trump. There's a video of a higher profile, I don't want to say high profile, but a Black Lives Matter activist saying that they're Marxist. I could be wrong, so fact check me on that one. I saw an article about it and some video about it. But many of these people on the left are overtly Marxist. But more importantly, whether or not it's Black Lives Matter or otherwise, there are many people in media who are overt Marxists who produce fake news and lie. I mean, actually, a BuzzFeed News reporter just got fired. I believe got fired for plagiarism. This is not the first. So there was another BuzzFeed reporter who quit and went to the Financial Times in the UK and got fired for spying on other news agencies. And now we're seeing another BuzzFeed reporter, BuzzFeed News, fired for plagiarism. This is important because both of these guys wrote fake stories smearing the right. Activists are in media lying and nothing is being done. They're slowly taking over, particularly at the New York Times. Now, there was a revolt recently at the New York Times and they ousted some editor. They're taking over. And a lot of people might say, good riddance, who cares? The New York Times is biased. Oh, boy. If you thought the New York Times was biased a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, wait until the extremists have control of the editorial section. You might be saying they do. Oh, I assure you. While some people may be biased, the extremists have not yet taken the whole thing, and you will regret it. Everything that comes out of that paper will be a lie, and already a lot of it is getting bad. I actually canceled my subscription recently. And it's funny because it's not like the third time I think I've done it. But the New York Times has this like waxing and waning of, they brought on Ben Smith, who's done a really good job. But now the woke extremists are pushing people out and they're gaining more ground. And if the gray lady falls to the extremists, listen, it's one thing to have a liberal biased paper. It's another thing to have have the most prominent paper in the country, perhaps the world, taken over by propagandist insurgents who will it's one thing to be biased. It's another thing to have these people willfully lying, which they've done. But imagine if every single thing that came out was a lie. And imagine if no one believed you. And then people would be like, you're wrong about Trump because I can prove it. Here's the New York Times, the paper of record, saying straight up, Trump did throw those puppies off a bridge. They wouldn't lie, would they? That's what's going to happen when they get completely overrun. And it's already started happening. It has. Front page stories that are completely fake, like the YouTube rabbit hole nonsense. Front page story. They put Philip DeFranco's face in the square talking about right-wing extremists, and he was angry about it. But that's what they're going to do. They're going to go after anyone who dare oppose them. Look, there's no neutrality to these people. This is what you got to understand about how the press is going to function once they take it. Philip DeFranco, you probably know him. He's got millions of subscribers. He does his general news, pop culture show Monday through Friday. I don't really, I don't know if what his schedule is, but he's neutral, right? He's neutral, slightly left. He got the Covington thing wrong, but a lot of people did so. But to them, neutrality is complicit. It makes you complicit, right? Silence is consent. The way they see it is you are either with them or you are against them. This is why you will see the fake news put his face on the front page. And there was a really funny thing that happened on the website. As you scrolled, it said, YouTubers will eventually get pushed down a rabbit hole, and eventually all that's left are extremists. And because it was randomized, the way it worked was you had all these different YouTubers. And as you scrolled down, several disappeared until finally it said all that's left is extremists. And some people got Philip DeFranco as the final, person. The New York Times then changed it because they were like, we're, basically calling people extremists. But I you know what, man, I'll tell you what, I've warned these people. They don't get it. They think that they can just, if I mind my own business, I'll be okay. No, there's no minding your own business, man. Listen to me. There's a story going around right now from, I believe it's the Washington Post, where they wrote about a private Halloween party 2 years ago where a woman wore blackface because she was trying to make fun of Megyn Kelly. No one knows who this woman is. No one cares about these journalists' private parties or what they do in their off time. But for some reason, they wrote this, I believe it was like 3,000 words, this really massive story about how this incident resurfaced. And everybody was confused. Why would the Washington Post write about a random woman who has nothing to do with anything? No, for real. It's like a random woman. And it was like she showed up thinking it was funny to make fun of Megyn Kelly. And everyone said, yeah, but you're still wearing blackface. And so she went home crying and took it off. That was the end of the story. Why did they name her and ruin her life? Let me tell you a story, friends. When I was in Sweden I think now over 3 years ago, we had interviewed several people. There was a big story about the local papers showing up to random people's homes and doxing them, showing their faces, and asking them why they were posting anonymous comments online. Apparently, they had surreptitiously gained access to an anonymous commenting platform used by a bunch of companies. I believe it was Discus. And once they found the private information of people who posted anonymously, they went to their homes and they filmed their faces and they challenged them. Why do you say these things? Why do you do this? What's the purpose of doxing private individuals? CNN's done the same thing. Shock people into compliance. There's no other reason, because you will not make money off this. Now, we can talk about why the Washington Post wrote this story about a random woman. And I'll tell you what, simple solution first and foremost, because I'm not big on conspiracies, The simple solution is they are desperate for traffic. And they were like, what about that story? We could write about that, right? And then get some kind of angle out of it. Shock content and social justice outrage gets clicks. And so this was them scraping the bottom of the barrel so hard they pulled up some wood chips. They got literally nothing. But hey, let's write about some private women in her life. Now, some may look at this like the media is trying to beat you into submission by telling you you're not safe. I won't go that far into any conspiracies, right? I think it's just this simple. Whatever the reason is, it's what's happening. CNN actually said when they covered a story that we reserve the right to publish this guy's name unless, he never does this again, makes a meme. And people bend the knee because they don't want their name plastered everywhere. It'll destroy their lives. People are scared of being canceled or targeted by the mob. So what happens when the Washington Post puts out a story like this? Well, I'll tell you. If they put out a story like this, don't be surprised if you find yourself in this situation. And this is the point. If you go to Jack Posobiec's Wikipedia page, boy, is this guy evil. I tell you what, Jack's not evil. You can disagree with him. You can criticize him for the things he's done in the past. That's fine. But he's just another guy. It's welcome to politics. There are a lot of good people, bad people. Everybody has their opinions. But when you look at how the media tries to go after people and then how that's weaponized by these left-wing activists, things get scary, man. Let me tell you. Once they start taking over the media, these people in the black masks or whatever are emboldened and protected. We saw it in the past. The Andy No incident where he was beaten by Antifa was a shock to the system that was really, really bad for them. And boy, did they panic. They were like, no, he's a grifter. He's far right. I don't know, man. You got a gay child of immigrants beaten and bloodied with his, sitting down with his ear was bleeding. It's going to be really hard to make him out to be the villain in that because he's just walking around minding his own business, right? That's what they're scared of. However, if the media is under their control, which it's ever increasingly becoming, expect to see photos like this, but they will reframe it. They will say, white supremacist threatens racial justice activist. Framing is everything. And that's what you'll get. Regular people won't speak up because they know what happens if they do. Their private information will be published. A story will come out talking about their Halloween party. And they'll say, why? Why did you ruin my life? And they'll say, oops, who cares? So it's more an issue of this mob is out of control, completely out of control. They are romping around, as Matt Taibbi calls them, Twitter Robespierres, going discipline to discipline, destroying people's lives. But it's worse than that. Many of these people work in major media companies. So I assure you, once the media has completely fallen to these people, you will regret it. But anyway, back to the executive order to make this point. They say, anarchists and left-wing extremists have sought to advance a fringe ideology that paints the USA as fundamentally unjust and have sought to impose that ideology on Americans through violence and mob intimidation. They have led riots in the streets, burned police vehicles, killed and assaulted government officers, as well as business owners defending their property, and even seized an area within one city where law and order gave way to anarchy. During the unrest, innocent citizens have also been harmed and killed. It's true. David Dorn, I believe his name was, got an alert that his buddy's pawn shop was being robbed, and he went to go check it out, and they killed the guy for some TVs, man. This is completely correct. These things are happening. So I have to wonder, Trump is, here's what he says. These criminal acts are frequently planned and supported by agitators who have traveled across state lines to promote their own violent agenda. These radicals shamelessly attack the legitimacy of our institutions and the very rule of law itself. Now, this is important because he then goes on to mention all of the statues that have been targeted, including Ulysses S. Grant, for instance. So it is clearly not about the Confederacy. The traveling across state lines thing is very important because I believe it actually gives the federal government jurisdiction over these criminal acts. Antifa does travel across state lines to push their ideology, to train and to engage in protests against, monuments or governments or places they're not even from. And I'm not talking about the U.S. because you have a First Amendment right across this country. I'm talking about a group of people who I've personally met and interviewed that me and other journalists refer to as the tourists, because they would literally go to like Turkey and China and other countries and engage in protests to support this far left ideology. And this is what I mean when I say that Antifa, though it is not a parent organization, like there's no Antifa Inc., there are individual cells which are active and organized, have property, have financing, and spread this ideology, typically some kind of communism, authoritarian leftism, whatever it is. It's an amalgamation of weird ideas. But they will travel to Germany. They will travel to Turkey, to China, to various countries, engaging with, training, and supporting these people. This is international. And many people tried saying, when Trump announced that Antifa should be labeled as terrorists or whatever, they say, you can't do that. Antifa is a domestic organization, blah, blah, blah. It's not really an organization, blah, blah, blah. Antifa is a flag. It has historical roots. It has a prevailing ideology. And there are people within Antifa cells that fly the flag and travel the world. Okay, this is not secret information. I am not privy to anything special. This stuff all was happening during Occupy Wall Street. You can watch the videos if you want. If you're more interested, you just Google search it. But that's what's been happening. Now we didn't call them Antifa or anarchists back in the day. It was just anti-capitalist or the far left. Antifa is more, came about in the past several years as they actually started branding themselves. But typically we refer to it as the black bloc protesters or something. I think we said anarchist a bit. But that's not accurate. True anarchists don't believe in violence. And I know a lot of people don't understand this and don't believe it, but no, it's true. True anarchists, be it the left or the right, do not believe you can use violence because violence is how you express your authority over other people. It's really frustrating to me when I see The left libertarian spectrum of the political compass is so often ridiculed and misunderstood. It's a shame. There's a meme going around right now about like woke social justice stuff. That is not left libertarian. That is authoritarian left. The adherence to a fringe ideology, the imposition of ideology or progressive structures is authoritarian. Left libertarian is live and let live. Right libertarian, free market, live and let live. Left libertarian, live and let live. Let's try and cooperate. That's it. Your complaints have all been with the authoritarians. Antifa is authoritarian. This guy got in Jack's face and threatened him. I think actually hit him. They splashed him with water. Attacking someone is forcing them to do what you want. Anarchy means without authority. These people express their authoritarianism by attacking other people. Now, I've had people say to me, I actually talked to an Antifa guy in Berkeley, and he says, you can't be authoritarian. Authoritarian is like a system. And I said, oh, then you can't be a socialist because socialism is a system. And he was like, well, no. I'm like, no, you can. If you believe that you have a right to bring weapons and threaten and instill fear in people so they get on their knees begging you for forgiveness, you are an authoritarian. You believe in authoritarian systems. You believe in oppressing other people to get what you want. Libertarian means you walk up to them, shake their hand, and ask them questions and talk to them and try and find a way to live together. Anyway, Trump mentions a bunch of their targets, and he notes, Ulysses S. Grant and things like that, abolitionists, things like that. He says individuals and organizations have the right to peacefully advocate for either the removal or the construction of any monument, but no individual or group has the right to damage, deface, or remove any monument by use of force. 100% correct. You got a problem with these, you have to vote. And they say to me, they keep tweeting at me, we've tried voting. No one will agree. Well, you're the fringe. No one agrees with you, so you resort to violence. Congratulations. You're a dictator. You dictate. You tell them, you know what? I don't care what you think. I am going to make you do what I want. Yeah, welcome to being an authoritarian. Borderline fascist, depending on how far progressive they go. In the midst of these attacks, many state and local governments appear to have lost the ability to distinguish between the lawful exercise of rights to free speech and assembly and unvarnished vandalism. They have surrendered to mob rule, imperiling community safety, allowing for the wholesale violation of our laws, and privileging the violent impulses of the mob over the rights of law-abiding citizens. Well, I'll tell you what, man, bravo. Policy. It is the policy of the United States to prosecute to the fullest extent permitted under federal law, and as appropriate, any person or entity that destroys, damages, vandalizes, or desecrates a monument, memorial, or statue within the United States or otherwise vandalizes government property. The desire of the Congress to protect federal property is clearly reflected in Section 1361 of Title 18 U.S.C., which authorizes penalty up to 10 years imprisonment for the willful injury of federal property. More recently, under the Veterans Memorial Preservation and Recognition Act of 2003, Section 1369, Title 18, U.S.C., the Congress punished with the same penalties the destruction of federal and in some cases state-maintained monuments that honor military veterans. Other criminal statutes such as the Travel Act, Section 1952, Title 18, U.S.C., permit prosecutions of arson damaging monuments, memorials, and statues on state grounds in some cases. Civil statutes like the public system, okay, we get it. They go on to say they will prosecute to the full extent permitted under federal law, as appropriate, any person or entity that participates in efforts to incite violence or other illegal activity in connection with the riots and acts of vandalism described in Section 1 of this order. I'll tell you what, all these people on Twitter, I want to see a perp walk, man. Listen, people try to claim over and over again that I'm right-wing or conservative, and my policy positions are very left, but left libertarian. So I personally take offense when the authoritarian left tries to call me right-wing because I believe in freedom and liberty. I believe the Confederate statues should come down 100%. And as a left libertarian person, I believe I should have a conversation with my community to state my case as to why we should set up a museum. We should put many of these statues there. We should explain why the statues were made, what they represent. We should put a memorial or plaque in the place of that statue saying, on this date, this was removed. You know my position. I do not believe these Confederate statues should remain up. And I believe there are actually many other statues, that could be taken down. if we have a real conversation about it, not an authoritarian mob trying to destroy everything. That's not conservative. But they try to do this because they need to make sure that they control what the left is, that the normies are beaten into submission. And they're going to, and they're winning, man, whether you want to believe it or not. They're winning. That we'll see now. The tides may be turning because Trump is coming out full force with his executive order. We'll see, if this actually works out. As I mentioned earlier, they said that they're going to actually give grants if you enforce the law, and you will no longer be eligible for grants if you don't enforce the law. So we're going to see a lot of states stepping up because they want that sweet green from the federal government. But who knows? Many of these governors hate Trump. Maybe they'll just say, no, I don't care. I have no idea. But I can tell you this. Trump is stepping up, and this may be the action needed, but I can just say I'm glad something is being done. We need to stop the violence. We'll see how things play out. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel, and I will see you all then.